Amazing. Well, we are live on YouTube, so feel free to get started whenever you're ready.
Thanks very much, Joanna. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much for coming along. My name's Steve Pottinger. I am here because I'm going to be sort of chatting with Emma Purshouse about her writing career, about various novel, Dogged or Dogged, and just various aspects of it and things that I think are of interest. So what we're going to do is have a bit of a chat. Emma's going to read a couple of excerpts from the novel. We're also hoping to have time for you to ask questions. So if, as you listen, there's things that you think we haven't covered that you'd like to know, please feel free to put it in the Q&A, and we'll try and come to them sort of later on. I think that covers that then. Right, Emma, you, for those of you who don't know her, Emma is a performance poet. She's performed the length and breadth of the country. She's a published poet. Her collection Close came out 2 years ago and was really well received. Beautiful collection. Also a prize-winning poet, and for about 18 months now, you've been the first ever Poet Laureate of Wolverhampton, haven't you?
I have, yeah. So it's a Rubery role, but I've been really enjoying it, despite the fact that the city's in lockdown, which has changed it somewhat from what I've got planned.
Yeah, I was going to ask, did that really sort of throw your plans into disarray, or were you able to adapt?
Yeah, it did a little bit, because I'd planned, I'm a writer that likes to mooch and sit in corners and eavesdrop like a lot of writers are, I suppose. And I'd planned to spend quite a bit of time wandering around Wolverhampton, sitting in cafes, listening to people, talking to people, and write poems about that experience. And of course, lockdown happened and that wasn't really an option. But I've still done writing about the city, and that it's been a wonderful experience still, but ever so slightly different under the circumstances. Yeah,
for sure. Okay, so on the downside, you weren't able to do that, and obviously we've had the pandemic. On the plus side, what we're here to talk about today, of course, is your debut novel, Dogged or Dogged, which looks a lot like that. Is it dogged or dogged?
It's both. Both are correct and relevant to the piece, so I'll just kind of let people call it whichever one they fancy.
Right, okay. And this is your first published novel.
Yeah.
Now, would it be fair, having read it and having published it and thinking that it's great and everybody should read it and enjoy it, but would it be fair to say that Dogged is part of a bit of a resurgence of working class writing that's happening at the moment?
I think it is. I've been writing or attempting to write novels for a number of years, since I was in my early 20s when I started my first novel, which wasn't published, complete but not published. And I'm 54 now, so it's taken quite a while. But I think recently, what with Kit de Waal's Common People, the anthology of working class writing that came out not this year, just gone, the year before. I think there was a lot of interest again in working class writing that came as a result of that coming out, and other publications coming out at the same time. So I think, there is a focus on it again at the moment, and that's been a very positive thing for me. And it made me return to my prose writing and look at them and think, well, maybe now I might stand a chance of actually getting it published, whereas I'd given up, really, to be honest.
Right, because your piece in Common People was about playing pool, is it?
Yeah, it's called Misspent Youth, and it's all about playing pool in Wolverhampton and beyond. So.
Right, an excellent piece. So, this might be an obvious question, but why does it matter that there's working class writing getting published? Well,
it matters because working class people and are part of the wider community, and it's important that everybody's voice, I think, gets represented in literature, art, and when it doesn't, that's a problem. I think you know, I mean, everybody's got interesting stories to tell. But I think publishing tends to be often a middle class, often very, very white, and lovely people that I've met within that. But maybe sometimes you tend to publish things that are of interest to you or about people like you. And sometimes I think that causes other voices to get overlooked and ignored without possibly meaning to. So I think it is massively important to publish other voices.
Because, I mean, rightly, I think, said, there's lovely people involved in publishing, but I know we've talked before about how your first novel, which is still unpublished, so that was written and predated, shortlisted for the Dyslexia Unpublished Novel Prize, yeah?
People who might not know, Dyslexia is a wonderful magazine for women writers. It's got massive circulation, and I got shortlisted for the Unpublished Novel Prize in the year that Rosie Garland won it. And she got a 2-book deal as a result of winning that. Palace of Curiosities was the book that came out as a result of her winning it. And yeah, as part of that, I got a chance to go off and pitch to agents and publishers about my first novel, but I felt really, really out of my depth in an environment like that. I had to the idea was that a load of us went to Waterstones in London, and we were supposed to walk up to agents and publishers and tell them about our books, and that sat so wrong with me. I just couldn't. It was horrible.
So there's kind of an unfortunate mismatch there, in that from their point of view, the door's opened, but from your point of view, there's still a massive hurdle to cross because you're just out of your comfort zone.
Absolutely. I didn't feel like I could talk to people of the sort of people that were there. I didn't feel good enough to be able to talk to them effectively, so I'd clam up or it would come out all wrong, if that makes sense, because I just felt completely out of my comfort zone. And so I didn't really do myself any favours in that, although I did come back with a couple of little business cards from people who said they would read it, and a couple of them did and got back and said, oh, they really liked the writing and thought it was, well done what I'd tried to do, but maybe I ought to think about setting it somewhere else other than the Black Country, which is where I'm from, and maybe not use dialect and accent.
Right. Okay. Now,
part of getting back to your original question, part of my reason for wanting to write is to show how my world is, and part of that is language and accent, which is as integral to that world as the landscape, if you see what I mean. Yeah.
So do you think now, with more experience and being a little bit older as a writer and having perhaps been out and about more, would you be less out of your comfort zone now in those kind of situations? No. Okay. Oh well. Moving swiftly on in that case.
That's not fair. I have got a little bit better about speaking to people and feeling like I deserve to be there, but there's always that voice at the back of your head going, what do you think you're doing here talking to these folk? If you see what I mean. So I think that is still a hurdle, and I think it would be a hurdle genuinely think it would be a hurdle for other working class writers. If you're shoved into an environment like that, sometimes you just feel a little bit, oh God, what can I speak to these people about? Do you know what I mean?
Because it's interesting, what you're describing really is imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
And yet I know that you, for I don't know how many years, but you earn your living entirely as a writer, don't you? Or from writing related activities.
I do, yeah. But it's a very grassroots kind of level. So the kind of stuff that I'm making my living from isn't stuff that's gets much attention necessarily. It could be like plays that I'm writing for local theatre companies. I perform poetry, so I get gigs at lots of all over the place. Well, they used to before the pandemic, all over the place, at little spoken word nights that are here, there and everywhere, dotted all around the country. And I love doing that kind of thing. And I work on a lot of arts projects, done books about local history, interviewing people about their lives and that kind of thing. And I love doing that. It's brilliant, but it is all part of this kind of writing life that perhaps isn't seen, because I think most people think of writers as published authors who kind of go on a circuit for literature festivals and perhaps do copywriting and editing and all that. And mine isn't that. It's a very different experience. It's hand to mouth between different kinds of projects, and I love it. It's brilliant, but it's sort of under the radar a little bit, I think.
Okay, well, hopefully that's given people a bit of a sense of where you're coming from. But now I reckon it's about time that they heard a bit of the book, the novel. If you're okay with that, would you like to read a section and to explain to us what it is? And
yeah, okay. So the idea behind the novel, it's two women in their late 70s who are protecting the contents of a tartan shopping trolley, basically. I'm going to read you the prologue to the book. This is just a little scene that happens before the book starts properly, and it involves one of the main characters who's called Nancy Maddox, and she's a woman, as I say, in her late 70s, but she's still working. Nancy stands on the step. Her shoulders have been aching all night. Years of scrubbing quarry tiles up at the Dartmouth are taking their toll. She rolls her shoulders forward and twists her head to peer over towards her back. A lump has started to form under her overall. What now? If it ain't one thing, it's something else. As she watches, the lump starts to bulge, move and rupture the skin. She hears Mr. Maddox's voice in her head. If God had meant us to fly, he'd have given us wings. The voice is punctuated by the sound of a trickle of whiskey being poured into a glass. Her emerging wing, just the one, unfurls itself in a grand gesture and then flails against her back. It is large and black. It's oily, tarry, nicotine stained, and the feathers are stuck together. It hangs like wet washing in a backyard on a windless day. Sort of bossed, she thinks. Marilyn comes out onto the step opposite and waves. Nancy tries to wave back without showing her new wing. Is that, says Marilyn, screwing her orange lips up into the shape of a cat's arse. No, says Nancy, cutting her off mid-question. It ain't. The conversation is ended. Bloody dreaming again, thinks Nancy as she awakes. There you go, so that's the prologue.
Lovely. I love the kind of magic realism, because the novel, we've got to say, is set in Wolverhampton.
It is.
You start that with something that would not be what people think of as archetypically black country, this strange wing growing out the woman's back. I love it. But so 2 questions about the novel.
Yeah.
You've set it in Wolverhampton, and why did you choose to do that? And also, interesting, your two of your major characters in it, as you said, are women in their 70s. So they're the main protagonists. Why them?
Well, I set it in Wolverhampton because that's where I'm from, and they do say, write what you know. So there are other novels set in Wolverhampton, not too many of them, I'll grant you that. But it's a place that I love, it's a place that I care about, it's a place that I'm really interested in. So to me, that's just, I write about Wolverhampton and the wider Black Country a lot. So that's just what I love, and it's, like I say, it's what I know. Focusing on 2 older women characters, there's 2 reasons for that. Nancy Maddox as a character has been a voice chipping away at me for years. She's appeared in my poetry quite often as well, as a sort of no-nonsense, quite stoic character that just kind of gets on with things. And I've always been fascinated by her. She's based loosely on somebody that that I kind of used to work with and thought a great deal of. So there was that element of it. But also, I read in the Stage magazine that there was no roles for older women in theatre and film. And there was an old article going on about it. So I thought, well, if I'm writing my novel and it ever gets published and they make a film of it, I'll have sorted that out, won't I? So it was like,
Excellent.
It was
Nice
that.
to think ahead. No,
like a bit of optimism.
Why not? And one of the elements within the book, and you kind of touched on it before when you were talking about pitching your first novel, and there's a little bit of it in that extract you read, sort of bossed.
Yeah.
Dialect. We both know Black Country dialects, but dialect in a book, it can really split a room, can't it? So why did you do it, and did you meet any resistance? Because I know before Ignite picked it up, this book's been through a long process. So did you meet any resistance to using dialect? Did you ever think about not using dialect?
That's a really interesting question. When I first started my first novel, the one that didn't get published, as I say, when I pitched it, people took an interest but said, "Oh, you need to get rid of the dialect. You need to get rid of the dialect, the accent." And that was the one thing I wouldn't compromise on, because as I say, it was important to me. But it's weird because as a result of being in Common People, I got put forward to apply for some mentoring with Penguin Random House, and I got shortlisted. And as part of that shortlisting, I had conversation with somebody in publishing about the book, and I said, when they'd read a bit, "Do you have a problem with the dialect? Because I've always been told to take it out." And they goes, "Isn't it the same dialect as Liz Berry, the poet?" And I goes, "Yeah." And they said, "Oh, well, that's all right then." And I thought, cheers, Liz. but it's obviously things have changed and ground has been broken, and suddenly it's more acceptable. And the other reason for using dialect was one of my when Train Spotting came out, that was revelatory to me. It was like, wow. I mean, different area entirely, but that book was what I recognised. That was the kind of lifestyle, people I was mixing with, and it was in dialect. And I just thought, it can, if people take the trouble, you can switch into it and you can start to understand it. I mean, Clockwork Orange, it's not dialect as such, but it's a kind of made up language, and nobody questions that and its validity, do they? So that's, I feel, go with the dialect. Although this novel, the third person narration isn't in dialect, it's the characters speaking voices that are in dialect. My first one, the narration was in it as well, so it's
Right.
kind of.
So for people who might be out of their comfort zone with dialect or struggle with trying to make it come to life, it's only small bits. I mean, I think it enriches it hugely, but it'll break you into Black Country dialect slowly. So if I bring out another one which is full dialect, you'll be tuned in by then. Breaking into the dialect slowly. Next thing you know, they'll be after battered chips. Right. So you've managed to write a novel which you've set it in the Black Country, which, much though we both love it, is never the world's most fashionable part of the country. You've got elderly protagonists, and it's funny, but it's gritty at the same time. How about reading us a little bit more so we get more of a sense of these characters?
Yeah, okay.
One eye on the time.
That's all right. Nobody knew how much Marilyn's bingo win was, but everybody knew that she'd had one. Doreen from up the top shop reckons she knew someone who was there at the gala bingo when Marilyn had won. It was the national game, 54k, Doreen said. Nancy Maddox wasn't really sure if Doreen knew what the phrase 54k actually meant. Bernice at the pub said she'd heard the win had happened online. Nancy knew this was rubbish but couldn't be bothered saying so. Like Nancy herself, Marilyn Grundy didn't even have a phone, let alone a computer. Rita from Sanger's shop at the bottom of the street said she'd heard that Marilyn had won at the Mecca and it was only 15,000. Only, thought Nancy. She could think of one or two things to do with only £15,000, even if Rita couldn't. Nancy is considering the bingo win as she stands on the step outside her front door. She takes off her glasses and huffs hot air onto each of the oval lenses, the left one first and then the right. The lenses are held in horn-rimmed effect plastic frames. She stole the glasses out of a bin in Specsavers ages ago where she used to clean. Nancy hadn't seen it as stealing because nobody had wanted them. She can see quite well with the glasses, better with than without. Nancy is thinking of going back inside when an ill wind blows down the street. She shudders as Daniel Grundy appears in a swirl of grit at the top of the road. He's unsteady on his feet. For a second it seems like he'll keel over, but he rights himself. His eyes seem to be rolling in his head. Bits of Daniel Grundy have come loose. Now here's trouble, if ever I seed it, says Nancy under her breath to the greasy breeze. Daniel sniffs the air. It smells of chip fat and tastes of dust. Nothing changes here. Daniel is hungry and thirsty, but he doesn't know it. He's forgotten. The rattling takes priority over everything. He sees a staring, starey woman standing on a step. She's swaying. She looks familiar. "Had a good look," he shouts before he rattles the letterbox on his mother's front door. He stoops and shouts through the flap, "Mom!" His voice drops onto the mat. Here's the junk mail that Marilyn Grundy never expected. She's not seen him for how many years? Maybe she never expected to see him again. Don't give junk mail house room, Marilyn. Rip it up before it's opened. Bin it. If you don't, before you know it, piles of junk mail will stack up and spill over your table, take over your sofa, fill up your house with unwanted things. The door opens a crack, the smallest crack. A dirty, yellowing dog's muzzle sniffs at the gap, and then Marilyn Grundy's washed-out face appears a few feet higher up above it. She has dirty yellowing hair that matches Toby's muzzle. Toby and Marilyn both stand and blink in the light. "Hello, Mom." Daniel. A look of shock spreads across her face, briefly, like a cloud might cover the sun as it moves through the sky. There you go.
Lovely. Lovely. I love the description of Daniel Grundy, and I'm always tickled by the detail you go into about the specs from Specsavers as well. Just that attention to detail, and that becomes a little story in itself, which gives us such an insight into her character, you know, and the kind of financial constraints that she lives under. It's beautifully done. A lovely comment, by the way, Emma, from Alison Lester about Dialect, saying, "I'm so glad that the book was published with Dialect in it. I had to slow down to understand those bits of dialogue, which was great. I stopped to take it in like I would have stopped to look at the buildings."
Oh, that's really lovely. Yeah, thank you.
Really lovely. Okay, so there you go. You've just described, lovely scene. So we've got Daniel, who I don't think it's giving much away to say, you know, he's going to be a bit of he's a flawed character. Troubled is Daniel. Yeah. There's all the characters in the book, when I read it, you've got a lot of affection for them. It would be very easy for a writer to set them up and then sit in judgment on them, and it doesn't seem like you do. You give us their flaws and their shortcomings, but they feel real, they feel rounded. You also, I found I wanted to read more because I didn't know what they were going to do. They were capable of surprising me at any moment, I felt. Was all of that important to you?
Yeah, I mean, I genuinely have affection for the characters. You know, like you say, that they're all flawed in some ways, aren't we all? But I wanted it, when I set out as well, I wanted to show, quite often the focus in books about, there's an element of addiction in this, but quite often the focus is on the addict and not necessarily on the effect on family and the people around them as well. And I think what I was trying to do in this was just show how difficult that can be on people that are around the person who is struggling with these problems, but without like putting the person down or being judgmental on the person. And that was part of what I was trying to do in this book.
Right. And I mean, I found that sometimes the characters did things that really made me go, oh, and really think my perception of them. But when you were writing it, were you ever surprised by what they did, or did you have it all planned out? So you were like, right, I know the narrative arc, I know where this is going, or did you find yourself writing and going, I never thought they'd do that?
Yeah, I did. I mean, as a starting point, I kind of thought, right, I'm going to come up with loads of scenarios to stick Nancy into to see how she'll deal with them. And I think I kind of probably wrote about 30 chapter headings or whatever and just started writing it and knocking out a draft. And I had plans with what would happen in those, but there were certain points, particularly with Daniel, where he just did something and I'm thinking, not supposed to do that, that's not on the plan. And I had to kind of go with it because he's just so driven by his addiction, really. And there's one, I won't say what the scene was, but towards the end there's a scene where he does something and I just think, I'm watching him. Oh God, how am I going to get him out of this? Do you know what I mean? And that was really quite fascinating because that hadn't happened in the first book that I did, really. So they were quite powerful characters, and Nancy never does anything she don't want to do. So that there was an element of it with her as well, just, you know, going with how she would behave.
I think
true to it. Yeah.
Yeah, because I think for me, it's the mark when I'm reading a book, the mark of good writing, or watching a film, or whatever. The mark of good writing is that the characters have got integrity. That when they do it, you go, well, yeah, they would, wouldn't they? Rather than, we'll have seen things, all of us, where somebody does something, you think, no, they wouldn't. You've done that in order. It's a plot device, and it kind of takes you out of the moment, and that suspension of disbelief falls away. But I felt with this, no, your characters just.
Oh, that's good to know because that does matter. That does matter that they are, they're true to themselves, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Who did you write this for?
Partly for the character, the woman that Nancy Maddox is based upon. Just, I don't know, I wanted her to have she mattered to me so much. I thought, I mean, I know the stuff in it isn't really what happened to her, but her and women like her that sometimes get overlooked. And that's initially who I was writing for, but also for my mates who don't usually read books, I think, in the hope that maybe they would pick this up and give it a go, because it was sort of things that they recognised, things that might have mattered to them.
Yeah. Have they picked it up? Sorry.
Yes, a couple of them have read it and got back to me and said that they've enjoyed it, and some have got hold of it and I don't know whether they've read it yet, but we'll see. But I did, what was brilliant, I did have one person who got in touch with me to say that their partner had never read a book before and she read all of this, and then I started reading other books, and that, to me, that's just worth writing it in itself, innit? That's, you know, that writing for anybody who likes a good story and, you know, might see themselves or people that they know in this and enjoy it, really.
Yeah. Okay. We're getting a few questions in chat, so I think I might in the Q&A rather, so I think I might throw a couple of those your way. Alison, who made the comment about the dialect, she said, now a question. The book is wonderfully poetic, but reads nonetheless as a novel. Did you struggle to hold the poetry back a bit, or did writing the novel come easily?
This novel is, I cut away about 30,000 words from the first draft. So it's a lot shorter, and there's a lot of poetry or scene painting went from it to keep the plot moving faster. But yeah, when I'm writing, I read out loud. So for me, the rhythm and the poetry of the piece is still there, even though it's prose. But yeah, I did cut out loads. I tend to work big and then cut back on things, even with stories. Like I like doing that. I like knocking out as much as I can once I've kind of written it, and then in the hope that the best bits will still remain, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think some people work by building up, like if it's pottery, like little coil pots, and they get it perfect and build it up. But I'm more like, give me a big dollop of stone and I'll chip bits off till I've kind of got back to what I want. I think I likened it before to coughing up a fur ball, the first draft. And then unpicking it, like. So.
Right, that's good to know. We'll put that in the literary comments for about the book. And one other question from H. Strachan, again, really about touching on dialect. What are your thoughts on using dialect language in other genres? For example, in a desert fantasy setting, using Yorkshire dialect in the narration and the speech. Thanks. That's quite a specific genre example there, H. Strachan.
I love dialect. I love other language. I think go for it. I think, you know, it makes it interesting. I don't know if anybody's read Bearmouth, Liz Hyder's book. If you haven't, check it out. It's absolutely brilliant, and it's got kind of it's all got its own kind of dialect within there, and it's just a fabulous read. The language is just really exciting, and the plot's great. But I love it. It's different, isn't it? It's poetic. It's fabulous. Yeah. So, you know, if anybody's thinking of trying something in dialect, I would say go for it. Although you might take about 25 years to get it published.
Sorry, that leading on has made me think of a question, which is, obviously, when you're writing in standard English, the spellings, everything is kind of laid out, you know. Dialect, is it? I mean, is it different? Is it easier? Is it better? Because there's no kind of absolute definitive rule about how you would spell words in dialect, is there?
No, absolutely not. What I do is I have my own glossary, so that whatever way I spell, like the word there, meaning there, I'll keep a glossary as I'm writing so that I know how I've spelt it. But somebody else might spell it different. It's like in Black Country we say do for don't. So you do sometimes see it spelled DOE, but I spell it DOH. So you know what I mean? But so long as you're consistent within the piece that you're writing, there's no hard and fast rules on it, really. It's phonetic, a lot of it. So
yeah.
Although some words have that, you know, some words are some words, so long as you're consistent, I think that's the best advice. Yeah.
And also, I mean, I'd also say that one of the things for me with with Dialect is that it's when it enhances, when it enriches the piece, or when it's integral to the piece. But if it's just there as a kind of a bolt-on for no obvious reason, then that's a different kettle of fish, isn't it? It's about the quality of the writing.
Yeah.
A question from Fran Hill. Are you writing another novel, Emma? This is good because I'm looking at that going, well, clearly hasn't gone, one was enough. So that's the kind of supportive comment we like. Thank you, Fran.
Well, I have got this prequel that I did, obviously the one that got shortlisted for the Dyslexia all that time ago, that I might look at again now. I'd probably change it because I think I wrote it when I was a lot younger, and it probably will, if I go back to it, it will have benefited from me having done the second one, if you see what I mean. And the second one is much better from me having done that first one. I learned a lot doing it. I keep saying no, I won't write another one because it's too much of a investment of time that's unpaid, or you don't know whether what you're doing is, whether you're doing it properly, if you know what I mean. But I keep getting ideas for them now I've got this out, and I keep pushing them away, but they keep nagging at me a bit. So Fran, I'm maybe.
I like the fact that maybe is said with a certain degree of pain.
It takes as long as the last one to write, because that's taken me 15 years to write this. If it takes as long as that, I don't know, I'll have.
Yeah, because am I right in thinking as well, that first novel, that is it Nancy that appears in that as a minor character in the first one, but then
yeah, so she actually does appear in the first one, but it's not, she's kind of a minor character, but I liked her, so I carried her forward and made her the focus of this. Well, I had a whole idea for a novel in each house in this street that's in dogged.
Wow.
I had characters for each one I was going to write about, but I was young and foolish then.
Brilliant. But now you're just older and just as foolish, so I think we should do this. Wonderful. Okay. Anonymous attendee has asked, what do you think can be done to encourage other working class writers to write stories about their experiences? And how do you think we can break barriers so that more writers feel comfortable to approach publishers to get their stories published? Good question.
It's a good question. I think it has to be a bottom-up approach and a top-down approach. So publishing has to change its attitude. And at our end, like I said, I felt uncomfortable and holding back. So part of that is not a chip on my shoulder exactly, but I kind of, sometimes we kind of pull back, not getting involved so we don't meet in the middle, if that makes sense. I do a lot of stuff at grassroots level with poetry. I run events, put on spoken word nights. We've been doing stuff online. And I think those kind of things as a community can encourage people to feel better about their work, have a voice, and then hopefully work together to kind of encourage each other to send stuff out. Because sometimes people don't send stuff out because they can't even get over that hurdle, thinking, oh, it'll be no good, people won't want to read it, why would they want to bother about my life because it's just this or whatever. And then also we've got very good regional, like in the Black Country, we've got Writing West Midlands, who are brilliant and encourage writers and support writers to develop. And other areas have got those kind of things as well, like New Writing North, New Writing South. You've got Apples and Snakes for performance poetry. And I think, if possible, people need to get involved with those kind of organisations to help bring them through. But it's also making that step, and even sometimes that's a step too far for folk. So I think it is about sort of grassroots writers groups as well, encouraging people. And if you are interested in writing, get yourself involved with a group of people, because it helps massively, because you support each other through.
Yeah, because I know you and I are both very heavily involved in that kind of live literature, performance poetry, whatever. And part of that is for the social interaction, but also for me, it would certainly be the instant feedback. The
Yeah,
positive reinforcement.
that's a good point, because when you're writing a novel, it's very lonely. That's why I switched to performance poetry, because you get an instant knowledge of whether your piece is working, for one. You do it in front of an audience, you know if it's going wrong, so you change it. So with a novel, you haven't really got that kind of, instant feedback. So I have to do both things really, just to keep myself on track with writing, because otherwise I think it could be soul destroying if you were just doing the one thing and felt completely isolated.
Yeah. And one other thing that I'd say in response to that question, approaching publishers to get their stories published. I mean, one thing that has changed quite a bit over the past, 10, 15 years is, you've got the advent of desktop publishing and the ability to get things out there. If you like, publishing a book now is probably easier than ever.
Yes.
Publishing a book that's done well is always going to be,
Yeah, that's the thing. I think your book or your things need to go through some kind of process.
Yeah.
Somebody offered to publish Dogged a couple of years ago, and I didn't feel it was ready, actually. So it's sort of, but that comes with a bit more knowledge about yourself, because when you start out, you're just keen to get things moving and on, and sometimes you need to let things sit and develop and be, what am I trying to say, and not be frightened to do that, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Because but because it was sort of like self-publishing. You've got to know when it's ready, I think, to do it.
Yeah.
But there's less stigma attached to that now. I think it's and good, because that means fewer gatekeepers, doesn't it?
Yeah. The hard thing always is selling them.
Selling it afterwards, and it's how you actually get that book out there when you're not known. So
Yeah. Okay, I think we've got time probably there's one last question here, and then maybe it'd be time to think about another extract from the book. But Holly Jackson has asked, what would be your best advice for overcoming that feeling of imposter syndrome that plagues so many writers?
It's really hard, because it's always there, really. You've got as much right as anybody else to be heard, and if you don't send your stuff out, if you don't keep putting your work out there and letting people hear your voice knocking at the door, then nothing changes. So you've got to kind of, even when the voice is nagging at you, you just got to do it. You've got to do it for yourself, and you've got to do it for the other people that are working class or whatever, like whatever it is that's holding you back. You just got to do it. You've got to do it for them. That sounds a little bit dramatic, but it's true.
Yeah. And it's also, I think, worth remembering that you might, if you enter a piece of writing into a competition, and when we do poetry competitions, whatever, you can send a piece off and it never gets anywhere. Imposter syndrome pops up because you go, maybe my writing is just not up to the mark.
Oh yeah, that's a good point, actually, because I learned that when I started judging competitions, like you say, so many entries and all of them are great. You might have a few that need to develop, but a lot of them are publishable or prize winnable, but you can't pick them all. And you've got to get it into your head that just because you don't get selected in a competition, it isn't because it's rubbish writing. Do you know what I mean? It's just genuinely because there's so many and they can only pick one or two. And that was a revelation to me when I realised that. I just thought, oh yeah, you can't get picked every time, and it doesn't mean it's bad. And I do always tell people that I do workshops and mentoring, and that's one of the things I always tell people, just because it didn't get selected, it doesn't mean it's rubbish. One point I used to send out little poems every time, because I knew sometimes they'd be trying to fill a gap on a page. And it can be as simple as that it doesn't fit the layout. Oh, look at that little one, that'll fit just there. And I used to get quite successful with my little poems. So I think they were filling that.
Any poets who are listening to this now will all be sending out little poems. So the clever thing to do is double think it and send out really long ones. Okay, thank you to the people who've asked questions. I mean, it's already heading up towards, gone quarter to one, and I know we have to finish on time. One thing, sorry, as publisher, I've suddenly realised I need to put my publisher's head on and go, right, this is Dogged or Dogged, and it's a brilliant book. It's a really good read. We have had great feedback and great reviews, and it deserves every one of them. It was a joy when Emma sent the manuscript, and when, would you be interested? I looked and I was like, I started reading it and just had to carry on reading it. So if you haven't read it and you'd like to, it's available from ignitebooks.co.uk. We've got an online shop. It's the quickest, easiest way to get it. You can also order it via your local bookshop. It's on the Nielsen database, so they can order it in. Obviously, large online platforms named after river deltas are also available. We try not to use them for a host of different reasons, which I'm sure you can imagine. So yeah, but if you'd like to buy it, we'd love you to read it, and please give us feedback. And you've had tell them about the publicity campaign, actually, before we have that last reading.
Oh yeah, I've been doing Dogs with Dogged on Twitter, and I've just been, if anybody buys the book, if they take a photo of their pet dog, or budgie, actually, because some people send budgies and cats with the book, I put it up on Twitter and just do a little kind of quote with it. But they've been going quite well, and they're quite fun to do. So it's a Dogs with Dogged. I haven't done any this week because I've been busy, but yeah, it's been really good fun doing that.
Wonderful. Okay, thank everyone for coming. It's been great that you've turned up. Thanks very much from us to Stay at Home Lit Fest for giving us this platform and for putting together such a wonderful programme of events. And we hope that, well, it's a great success, and that you go and soak up more of the free literature and talks that they've got on offer. Emma, thank you. I'd just like to ask you to close things off with one last reading from the book, if you're okay with doing that.
Yeah, great. As Steve just says, thanks very much, Stay at Home Lit Fest, for having me. I'm going to loads more events over the weekend. Fantastic stuff. So yeah, here's me last little bit from the novel. If you do get it, I hope you enjoy reading it. There's a knocking at the door. When Marilyn gets there, Nancy is standing, glowering. Marilyn is a bit scared of Nancy, but she still smiles. How are you? More to the point, meow. What you done to your fizzog? Marilyn reddens and touches her cheek. I'll give it a bit of a knock on the kitchen cupboard. There's Yoa Daniel, says Nancy, indicating that she knows exactly what kind of kitchen cupboard Marilyn means. He's gone out somewhere. Where? Dunno. Is he coming back? Dunno, he's left his bag here. He might have gone to look for the dog. Toby got out last night. Accidentally. Daniel's a good lad, really, says Marilyn, half-heartedly trying to defend her son against something that hadn't yet been said. Yo, wanna watch out for your winnings, says Nancy, straight to the point. In Nancy's opinion, Marilyn is puddled, and she's betting the flighty piece will not have put the bingo money in the bank, however much it is. She probably doesn't even have a bank account. Nancy is judging Marilyn by her own standards. Nancy hasn't got a bank account. But then what would be the point? She doesn't have any money. Oh, Daniel wouldn't. Marilyn stops herself as she remembers the £30 that Daniel has evidently borrowed while she was asleep. She thinks about the empty green tin lying on the bedroom carpet. She's sure he'll put it back when he signs on and gets some money. Nancy raises her eyebrows, blinks a number of times as if she's reading Marilyn's mind before cocking her head to one side and squinting. Marilyn thinks about the mess in her kitchen, the unexplained hieroglyphics in biro on her wallpaper, and the contents of her makeup bag now inexplicably strewn about the back room floor. Wait there, says Marilyn. Nancy waits. She hears some clanking. and one or two curses. Marilyn rummages about in the glory hole, setting the wall in the passageway between the front room and the back. Nancy can hear lots of grunting and items being moved about. When Marilyn comes back, she's pulling an old tartan shopping trolley. One of the wheels is missing. She looks up and down the street and says in a hushed voice, "You look after it for me." Nancy looks uncertain. "I trust you," Marilyn says. Nancy nods, takes the handle of the trolley from Marilyn. The axle scrapes the floor as she pulls it over the road towards her own house. Thanks very much for listening. Cheers.
Cheers, thank you, Emma.
Thank you both for just a fantastic session. Those readings were brilliant.
All right.
Thank you for being a part of the session. I'm going to close off the Zoom meeting now, but yeah, enjoy the rest of the festival and thank you for being a part of it.
Cheers, Joanna. Take care.